Give. Give until it's built. It's episode 35 of For Our Edification. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of For Our Edification. I'm Eddie Francis, and For Our Edification is your dose of personal leadership goodness. For Our Edification is brought to you by Edify Ventures, LLC, brand strategy and experiences. Learn more at edifyventuresnola.com. And you can get past episodes of For Our Edification at eddiefrancis.com. Also, you can go to YouTube to get some past episodes. And of course, you can get For Our Edification wherever you get your podcasts. August is Black Philanthropy Month, and its roots go back to 2001, but it actually launched in 2011 with a global summit to commemorate the United Nations Year and Decade of People of African Descent. The 2023 theme is Love in Action. You want to find out more about Black Philanthropy Month? You can go to the show notes, but there's one group in Dallas that actively practices Black philanthropy. They're called the Heritage Giving Fund. Halima knows all about them. I thought it would be great, though, to pay a visit to one of his founders, Akilah Wallace. She joins us on this episode of For Our Edification. The views and opinions expressed on For Our Edification do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the hosts, guests, or any entities with which we are affiliated. Akilah Wallace founded Heritage Giving Fund with Froswa Booker-Drew and someone that you might know associated with the podcast, Halima Francis. During Black Philanthropy Month in 2017, the three women and the other founding members came together as the mission goes to encourage philanthropy in the Black community, to contribute in a strategic and meaningful way, and to bring a new source of funding to nonprofit organizations serving Black women and girls throughout the state of Texas. And to date, Heritage has awarded more than $100,000 in grants. Akilah is also the principal consultant of Taylor Wallace Social Impact Consultant. And Akilah, welcome to For Our Edification. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. It is always good to talk to you. And I couldn't let Black Philanthropy Month pass without doing a Black Philanthropy Month interview. It's something that means a lot to Halima, means a lot to me. And I thought to myself, why don't I ask Akilah about this stuff? Because of the work that Heritage has done. So first of all, I mean, let's find out about you, because you're like Queen Awesomeness and all this other good stuff. So talk about what it is that you do and what got you interested in the work that you're doing right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I really do appreciate this opportunity to speak during Black Philanthropy Month. So, what got me into this work? So, one, I'm a career nonprofit executive. Most notably, I've been recognized for my work as a fund development expert or fundraiser and a change agent in the philanthropist sector here in North Texas, as well as nationally. So as you mentioned, I work as a principal consultant for a consulting company I started earlier really a couple years ago, but really working it full time this year. And that is what pays my bills, supporting area nonprofits with not only their fund development plans and strategies, but ultimately really looking at their nonprofit executive infrastructure and wanting to look for gaps and as well as opportunities for improving systems, especially within operations, finance programs, and ultimately how it correlates to the fund development goals and revenue goals for the organization. And so go ahead.
No, so all right. So wait, let's put your expertise to work really, really quickly. Because the thing I love to do with this podcast is I love to talk about personal leadership. And a lot of people who start nonprofits, they do it because they are into the cause. I mean, it's the cause that counts to them. So when you consult with folks, what's one thing that you feel that when you get to the founder of the nonprofit, the executive director of the nonprofit, what's one thing that you find you have to stop and say, okay, let's have a conversation about moving your nonprofit forward? What does that conversation sound like sometimes?
Well, I'll say what I'm discovering is that there's some consistency in the way that the heart is leading nonprofit founders and leaders, and ultimately them believing that is what's going to help sell the dream, and as well as mostly unlock the dollars that are really needed. But what I'm discovering is that also ultimately when I start asking questions about budgets, that there's a disconnect there. So for me, I'm really interested in the ways that, nonprofits lean more into like an initial plan that is based on like true numbers and realistic numbers that is driving you and how you build out your programs, because ultimately people want to do everything under the sun because their heart is, pulling them towards it. And ultimately, I mean, the need is great in the community, right? But when it comes down to funding that work, that's where often there's a disconnect. So for me, it's about how do we align, realistic budgets that is on your expense side and really thinking about what it is that you truly need to be successful, so that you can unlock the revenue streams that you need.
Yeah. It's so interesting when you start to dig into the business part of the nonprofit. And, with me having worked in higher education, it works the same way a lot of times. In higher education, there's so many people who are they're into the cause, they're into the mission. We do this because we got to get these kids through, we got to educate them. And I'm the marketing dude, I'm the butthole marketing dude who walks into the room and I'm just like, yeah, but this academic program has like 5 people in it, and the other academic program has like 150 people in it.
Yeah,
we gotta make sense of what we're doing right here. And oh, by the way, the price point is just a little high. So,
yes, absolutely.
So let's make sense of what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're touching on it. I mean, ultimately, let's be realistic, and I mean, still committed and passionate. You don't want to take away from that, and you want the people who you're serving to be, the driver for why you show up each day. But also at the same time, especially for Black folks in philanthropy, we can reduce, at least hopefully reduce some stress, some frustration, by just being more intentional about the efficiencies and our effectiveness by way of how we really invest that initial time when you're in the founding stage, or even as you like kind of got to just go right into it, that you begin to invest and have people on your teams, whether that's board members or you get consultants or, staff, however that looks, who's also building the infrastructure at the same time. Everything, how is it talking to one another? How, programs, what are they doing? Are they, producing the outcomes and the metrics that's going to help to go along with the story? Because yes, people want to, pull on hearts, like, yes, this is what happened with this young person or this, this community group, through a story. But ultimately, when it comes to fundraising, you need to align that story with some actual impact. And that impact is often how you get that is by way of having efficiencies in your systems and processes. So you can go back and say, that's right. We were documenting how many people we served and, and the outcomes that came out of that service. So that's my little tea.
So wait, but you know what? Let me ask you another really important question. And I think this is extraordinarily important. And this is going to lead into the conversation about heritage, especially when you're dealing with nonprofits that are led by Black folks. One of the things I found, I worked at 3 HBCUs, and one of the things that I found was a conversation I had to have a lot of time with us was we can have it both ways, We don't have to choose one thing or the other thing.
Yeah.
We can have mission and we can have revenue results. We can have both of these things. And and it just seems to me, and tell me if this is your experience, that in the Black community, something that we kind of struggle with is that we think we got to make a hard choice when sometimes we don't have to make a hard choice. We just have to kind of dream big and think big. And we do have to make a sacrifice to meet the goal, but we can have it both ways. And I would say on top of that, we deserve to have it both ways. Do you find that sometimes you have to have that conversation with folks to say, hey, listen, no, don't turn this into a tragedy. You didn't like the business news, but that doesn't mean it's a tragedy. That just means we got a little bit more work to do and we're going to get there. Do you find that you have to have that conversation sometimes?
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, I really invest intentional time and resources into building trust with the nonprofit leaders. I mean, we come, to any body of work already holding a variety of, experiences with oppression, and knowing that we're up against, systems of, all the systems, right? All the isms. And so sometimes you can already come in defeated and or, with a chip on your shoulder because you feel like you just have
Yeah.
so much to prove to, to whomever that may be, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's
And
to
you just feel
yourself.
that sting. You feel that sting. Yeah.
Yes, but for me, I'm like, let's build some trust, and that ultimately understanding that the questions I'm going to be asking of you, your board, your team members, or whoever, the key stakeholders are that's involved in, our relationship and our process, and understanding that I'm here to move us all along. I have a
Mm-hmm.
genuine, authentic, deep love for our people, for our communities. And
Mm-hmm.
but also I've had the opportunity to work in other spaces, and I've seen how non-Black leaders have led, how they raise money, how they service their programs and their operations. And so I've seen examples of what has worked very well, and some examples of where we have contributed to our own struggle. And
Yeah.
so for me, yeah, it's about the trust building, and ultimately, and even in that, as much as I can say it 50 million times, I'm not here to judge. So when I'm
Right.
asking a question and your response, and in your heart that the answer is no, I don't have it, and likely no, I didn't even know that was something I needed to have, and I don't
Yeah.
even know where to start, to be okay with saying that, or saying yes, we do, but then once you give me access to it and I see that it's like kind of all wonky and just not right, that you don't take offense to the recommendations and the counsel and guidance that's given to you, and recommendations on how to move towards improvement, because ultimately we're in this together. And
Mm-hmm.
whether I don't work for you, and I'm not the founder, and it's not my mission, and I get that, and it may not even necessarily be a community that I'm directly impacted by or with. However, I'm here to serve, and I'm here to serve with you. So I would also suggest the ways in which we like give ourselves grace, and understanding
Mm-hmm.
that it's okay whether, and goes for even organizations that have been around for a long time,
Yeah.
because I just want to make sure this isn't just about newfound, new small grassroots organizations. This can apply to organizations that have been in existence for quite some time, and that can be large, institutions, with
Mm-hmm.
several, affiliates and chapters across the country, right? It can go across the board in the ways of which, like, opportunities for improvement can always show up, and also the ways that you can build upon your successes. And I'm there to partner with organizations to help them come up with that great case for support so they can unlock the revenue that they need.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I absolutely loved when I got a chance to watch Heritage at Work a couple of times and just talking to Halima is I love how Heritage is such an engine of empowerment. And I love the approach that Heritage has. So let's first of all, I mean, for folks who are not in North Texas and who have not had the privilege to learn about Heritage, first of all, with you, who you were the main voice behind getting this thing started. So let's talk about what Heritage is and why the work of Heritage is so important.
Yeah, so thank you. I appreciate that. So grateful that we, uh, but by me working for a community foundation and being exposed to not only the fundraising side and seeing who was being introduced and invited to be a part of giving opportunities, there was also the other side on the grant making side where also was a witness to kind of seeing who was getting funding, and
Hmm.
seeing some patterns, as well as the ways in which there were some gaps. And so for Heritage, I'm really proud and to stand with the over 80 plus women, Black women, who have contributed to the Giving Circle since 2017, and ultimately being recognized as a national model for collective giving. And so the Giving Circle, we were founded in response to a regional disregard for Black women in the nonprofit sector,
Hmm.
and that ultimately contributed to inequitable funding opportunities and philanthropic support. It silenced the leadership and perspectives of Black women-led nonprofits, and exacerbated false. Look, I can't even say the word. exacerbated false narratives about Black communities, including
Yeah.
our desires and our needs, by
Yeah.
way of this. So, we wanted to make sure that we showed up and brought together Black women who will pull our individual resources together for the purpose of us making decisions around one, not only, who would get access to our resources by way of our funding, as well as our continued grantee support, but ultimately influencing just the way that the process took place, and helping to shape, the ways in which grant making decisions would take place, not only within our given circle, but ultimately creating a ripple effect for other funders in not only in North Texas, but also in other spaces. And so, we show up with very intentionally with an equity and gendered lens, and we're committed to engaging Black women of varying economic status and backgrounds, because also we recognize that the word philanthropy sometimes can be daunting and or intimidating, and so
Yeah.
we wanted to create an opportunity for Black women who may not have seen themselves as a philanthropist per se, or even recognize that was something they were already doing, or if they really wanted to be more strategic and intentional, that this was a space where you could, a safe space for you to be able to show up with your dollars, but as well as your voice, and helping to, influence the sector, and, in a very intentional and bold way.
You're listening to For Our Edification. We're talking to Akilah Wallace. She is one of the founders of Heritage Giving Fund, which is based in Dallas. And also she is the principal consultant of Taylor Wallace Social Impact Consulting. So for you personally, what has been one of the most rewarding parts, or one of the most rewarding experiences when it comes to being a part of Heritage?
Yeah. So as I, mentioned, I mean, one, the sisterhood with all
Mm-hmm.
these really amazing women, many of whom I may not have encountered in other spaces because we just may have been in different industries. But if I had to pinpoint like one in particular, one of the most rewarding experiences has been knowing that our membership has not only helped to raise and invest over $100,000 for Black women and girls, but the fact that our platform has been leveraged, our power and our influence has ultimately helped to direct millions of dollars of philanthropic support to not only our 16 grantee partners, so those are the 16 organizations that we funded within this 6-year time period, but also, we're pretty sure that, there's many more organizations and leaders who have been the beneficiaries of increased funding or consideration, opportunities to speak in panels, especially during the global pandemic.
Yeah.
We had different groups and individual funders, some traditional ones reaching out to us to ask us, who should we, invite, that's more grassroots organizations and Black women-led organizations and voices to speak in a variety of different panels and, discussions, or contributing to, kind of backdoor discussions with white funders around, like, calling them in and inviting them, calling them out and in around the ways that there's been significant inequities in funding. So that is what has been most rewarding for me, is knowing that not only, yes, the money is great and we're grateful, for every single dollar that
Mm-hmm.
individuals, as well as, not just our members, but even supporters and friends of the Given Circle, that anyone can go and sow a seed that is pulled together with all of ours for grant making purposes. But ultimately, the fact that it has created this really incredible and powerful movement, I've called it that. And, and I speak to, my Heritage sisters and say, when you join us, you're a part of a movement that's very intentional about not only increasing funding, but elevating elevating the voices of Black women and girls in leadership roles throughout the nonprofit sector, but also, helping to shape the narrative about us as a people, about our communities, and helping to drive resources to pockets of North Texas that may have been overlooked or really was only researched per se,
Mm-hmm.
versus like folks who's like, nah, let me show up with dollars, but also let me look into other organizations that maybe they need board members, or they're looking for volunteers, or they need in-kind donations. So yeah, it's created this magnificent ripple effect that I'm really proud of, and has been the most rewarding for me.
I'm going to say something that's going to make me that I'm not going to be very popular in my hometown for saying this. But anybody who knows me knows that I don't have a problem with that. And so one of the unfortunate things that happens, and Halima and I actually had this conversation not too long ago, because it was something that it's a source of frustration for her. And with me being a native of New Orleans, it's a source of frustration for me too. Unfortunately, even in the nonprofit sector, there seems to be this spirit of competition. Folks just kind of going at each other. There's one nonprofit I can think about right now. We had the executive director on this podcast. He's doing outstanding work. But for whatever people, the attitude is, well, he's getting all the money. He's just getting all the money. And I'm just like, he's not getting all the money. No, trust me, he's not getting all of it. Right. There's a lot out there. Abundance. And you can have it too. But take your focus off of him and mind a business that pays you, and you'll be fine. But Heritage, one of the things I enjoy looking at from afar, because I follow you on social media, is how y'all support each other. Like, y'all seriously, y'all really do have this sisterhood effect where you seem to be the wind behind each other's back. I mean, what keeps that motivation going for y'all?
Oh, man, what keeps that motivation? I think there's a significant portion of us who the members are represented by women who actually work in the industry.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So y'all know what's at stake.
Yes. Yeah. That part, you know what I mean? So it's kind of different, like, for those who, maybe work in other industries, and, there's the community service aspect of your life and your values and family values and individual, as well as even, the ways in which, like, the corporation you work for and those opportunities for you to show up collectively as colleagues. Right. But for us, many of us, and especially majority of our founding members, we come from the sector. Many of our members, we're executive directors of organizations. We're chief development officers. We're program officers. We have various roles within the sector or working for other funders and, foundations and corporate giving programs. So because of that, we have a very, unique perspective on what is working, what isn't working, or just even the thoughtfulness around the types of questions that need to be answered, or for us as a body to come together and wrestle with and consider, that then contributes to the type of programs or, topics that we are discussing through our philanthropy empowerment sessions, or, the intentionality of, like, Dr. Froswa Booker-Drew. And when, she was like, from her lens, she was like, not only are we going to fund these nonprofits, but we're going to, there was a moment where it was like, we're going to match them up and be like mentors to them. We created, very intentional spaces to provide training and development with those organizations. And then during the global pandemic, we expanded it further by doing web series that are available. Those recordings are on our YouTube. So it's that level of energy and accountability to not only to the community, but also to one another, because also we know that when you shine, I shine.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And if you're not shining, but I'm shining, then it's just not right. And
does it even make sense? Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? I need all of us to be in this together, because ultimately it's about our communities. We want our babies to be great. We're mothers, we're sisters, we're daughters, right? We're community influencers and change agents. We're business owners. We're all of the things. And so all of that shows up in the way that, like, we build together. We want to grow together. We challenge each other. I mean, we took a little over a year off, because members, following the pandemic, when we was like, many of us was on the front lines of all the things, right? We're directly impacted, right? That they was like, yo, we got to take a break, right? And not because we don't want to continue to invest in Black women and girls, but individually and as a collective body, we are traumatized. We are harmed, and we need rest. And so we took that time. And then in that same period, there was a smaller group of our members who decided that, you know what, let's go through a strategic planning process. And I'm grateful for those women who said, while the majority are, kind of prioritizing everything else going on in their life. We want to sit and survey our members. We want to, kind of do some research based on, what's happening in the industry and make some recommendations for how, as a given circle, we want to continue, but how we will show up a little different. And one example is, as much as we know about nonprofit infrastructures, and again, that's what I do as a consultant, in the founding of the Given Circle, I mean, we just went and we did the thing, but we also had to realize that there was some inefficiencies within our infrastructure and systems and process, and who was holding, a lot more bodies of work and maintaining social media and, and all the things behind the scenes, and also the ways that we like, what, we also could be, more intentional about diversifying our revenue streams in the same way that we ask others to do the same. So anyway, so it's through all of that, through our relationships and lived experiences, that ultimately has shown up in the way that we lead, the way that we advocate, and the way that we really just love on one another and the community as a whole.
All right, so let's put your Black Philanthropy hat on, your Black Philanthropy Month hat on. Okay, so you got the everyday person who is out there right now, and they hear about philanthropy, and of course, the everyday person, when they hear philanthropy, of course, they think, well, I don't have a whole lot of money, so I can't, right? So we know how that goes. And I was that person before I met Halima. I was that person, right? But as we actually fleshed out on one of the episodes of the podcast, there's so much more to Black philanthropy than dollars, right? Yeah. So from your perspective, in celebration of Black Philanthropy Month, what do you think the everyday person needs to understand about the impact about how philanthropy is practiced specifically in the Black community?
Yeah, no, I will start by us recognizing and acknowledging that even the smallest acts of kindness equate to philanthropy. And so and for people to center the fact that the word philanthropy is the love of humanity. So at the center of it is love. And as Black people, for a variety of, the many faith traditions that we bring as our wholeness, love is generally at the center of every belief system or non-belief system, honestly. And so for this year's Black Philanthropy Month, the theme is love in action. And guess what? That's Black folks all day, every day.
We're constantly singing about love, writing poetry, and doing all that stuff.
The words, right? And even the words may not even necessarily show. We've heard culturally in the way that folks can say, I may not have heard "I love you" per se from certain family members or from community members, but love shows up in action for us, and so philanthropy for the everyday person is ultimately how you show your love through your actions. And think about it. That could be from when you provided a meal for the bereaved and shut in to our wonderful people who choose to say, I'm going to mentor a young person, or I'm going to show up differently for my niece or nephew because I see that my family member is struggling, or, not necessarily struggling, but maybe just overwhelmed. It's just a lot, right? And here I am, a single individual, and I have a lot more capacity. So you know what? I'm just going to show up by way of, hey, I can go pick them up from practice, from their orchestra practice, right? Or, whatever it is. So for us, it's through the actions, and as well as the dollars, as well as even as we think about you in marketing, and these platforms like this is an opportunity to show your love through action and giving business owners and various leaders and voices an opportunity to spread the good news about their products and services, or or what they're doing in the world. This is love in action. This is a way of which different industries show up. If there's a person who's a content creator and and you're really good at creating reels and streams and all that stuff, and that there's a young person in your town who people are saying is possibly the next up and coming person in said athleticism or theater or whatever the case may be, reach out to that young person and be like, hey, maybe I can do some reels for you, or help you come record you as you're performing and chopping and screwed it together to help you build your TikTok platform, right? So all the unique and special ways that the everyday person can do that. And when I think about, some other opportunities, I mean, look, I made a list. You ready? Just a couple examples, right? Contact an area school and offer to pay a student's lunch balance. Okay.
Wow.
I know people say, you be at, the drive through and you pay it, for the person in front of you, but right. But we have young people in our community, in our families who are in need. Luckily, there's many school districts I know here in Texas, where they're starting to cover breakfast and lunch for students. So that may not be. So check and see whether that's a service in your community. But do something as simple as that, right? And again, no one has to know that you did it. Just do it.
Right.
Clean out your closet and donate your gently used clothes to a resale store. Maybe gather a group of friends and clean up the yard of an elderly neighbor or, your neighborhood park, right? For some, I just joined my son's PTA team, PTA, right? And baby, this president has a list of things that is needed, by what, that students need as well as that their parent needs. So, consider reaching out to some PTAs and considering donating some products or services to support them. Folks like, hey, we just need T-shirts, we need lanyards, or the young people need, whatever, right? We have back to school drives, but also, there's other elements of needs beyond just, book bags and those supplies, as well as, ultimately, I'm always going to end with, whatever you have that's considered to be kind of that extra resource. Like, we don't want you going hungry to help another, but ultimately, if you're unable to donate your time and or intangible resources that you may have available that you can provide as an in-kind, please consider donating dollars. And that can be $10, $50, $100, whatever you consider to be meaningful to you. And ultimately select a cause that is either meaningful to you and or possibly in honor or memory of a loved one. So you may think, well, I don't know, it wasn't a big deal. I can't think of anything, but you know what? My grandmother always, went down to a certain, soup kitchen and, and helped to serve food there. Make a contribution in honor of your grandmother. And so, these are just little ways, that doesn't require you to, I was going to say write a check, but no one writes a check anymore. But, set up your automatic payment through your bank account or, ACH. So, yeah.
No, you'd be surprised who still writes. Says, so Akilah, listen, I was in a frat chapter meeting the other night, and one of the brothers in the room, he was like, "I need to write a check. Can I write a check? I'm writing a check," and he meant he was writing a check.
And that's perfectly fine, because me as on the receipt, I would have took that check, pulled out my phone, logged into that bank app, took that picture, uploaded front and back, and it's clearing right now.
But what really strikes me though, it strikes me that in our community, it hit me as you were talking that in our community, the way philanthropy is practiced a lot of times is the intention of relieving the pressure in someone else's life. Like that one day that you pick up a kid from school and you say, listen, I got it. I'll go pick your kid up. You go do this.
Yeah.
And you find out later that this was a job interview, and it was the only time they could do that interview, and you didn't ask what you got going on. They just came, you said, could you get my son? It's like, yeah, I got you. I'll get your son. And then later on, you find out that you just helped somebody get a job, that they needed,
Absolutely. And maybe so that time while you were with that young person, when you picked them up and you was with them and you were having small talk and conversation with them, or maybe you took them to grab something to eat. And, I know with some kids, when it's not your child, folks, be like, you want some fast food or whatever. And then that child could be like, yes, my mom always just cooking. I'll never get the fast food, right? That could really mean something to that child. But just that small talk and just them having, another person to communicate with and, maybe open up in a way that, sometimes you young people aren't willing to do with those who are closest to them, that then creates another element of way that you've served, that you've shown up with love and action, the way that you've been philanthropic, without it being, all intentional and also, just one last thing, y'all. And I get it. I have a platform and marketing community. Often in this new world, we post and, everything is for public consumption, but, just have some level of discernment, to, be mindful of, if and when it should be shared on these public platforms, and being mindful of putting youth, out, but also, check your heart as to, why you're doing something
I was just
for
about to
someone.
mention that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, making sure your intentions are in the right place, and and ultimately who's at the center of it, and asking, in me doing this, am I likely contributing to additional harm? Because also, that's a real thing. I got my African garb on. White savior is mentality is real, and it can and has been transferred to non-white people as well. And so we have to be mindful of the ways that we check ourselves, and how we show up in spaces, and how we're being protective of one another. And I'm especially sensitive when it comes to young people, and not expecting that you should have access to folks like you heard my recommendation with the young, starting off with pay for a young person's lunch. I did not say show up to the school and and demand that you get to facilitate tutoring or training. That may be a need, but check with them, with the source, because many more organizations, if they are, or they should be, are being more mindful of who they bring around people, as well as those who may be directly impacted, right? You can go into spaces, where it's, majority formerly incarcerated folks, and you're using language that is, very disrespectful or inconsiderate of their perspective and their experience and what they've been through. So just make sure you also, do your pre-work. Do your research, do your training, get familiar with appropriate language, and get an understanding of the space that you're going to be in, because also even those who may have the best intentions can do more harm than good. So I also challenge folks that as you're wanting to, be great and serve and be philanthropic during Black Philanthropy Month, and really Black Philanthropy is 365, that we hold ourselves accountable, and that just because we are Black and in Black spaces doesn't mean that you're safe, and that you're that you are good for for others. So yeah.
I could do a whole podcast episode on that one, because I look, I have a lot of thoughts about that from the HBCU space, and I will say this. I will say this, because I gotta say it, because it's on my heart and I gotta get it off, because what you said is just really important. And I will say that and this is really, I think, going in with a lack of intention and not going in with a servant leader mindset. And I see us do it to each other. But when you get these people who come into HBCUs in leadership, and they come in with the attitude of, I got to straighten y'all out. And it's like, no, you don't have to straighten anybody out. What you have to do is you have to come in and serve. and if your intention is to make things better, then we need to talk about how you can do that without it turning into some sort of penalty. And I remember one thing, a lot of HBCUs have this obsession with having PR and media attention, and it drives me nuts. And I really think it comes from this mentality of, honestly, it comes from a stance of weakness, because it's we need. And the point I'm making, and what goes along with this point, was I've had media outlets reach out to me, and it's been Black folks, and they have come with this attitude of, well, y'all know y'all need the exposure. Whoa.
Oh.
You are not being a philanthropist right now. you are not giving me something I can't get on my own. Okay. So first of all, no, I'm not going to do the interview, right? I'm not going to get my president and drag my president to the interview. But the way you're coming at me is not the way you think you're coming at me. You know, the way you're coming at me is you are coming at me with this attitude of lack, as if I'm lacking something, and you are so benevolent to give it to me, and that's not helping the situation. And I see the same attitude when you have alumni who write a check for $50, and yes, the institution is grateful for the $50. But when the check is written in the spirit of, well, y'all know y'all need it, it's like, well, hold on, whoa. I don't know if I want your funky check, because this is a funky check. This check got some bad juju on it. But if it's written in the spirit of, I know it's $50, but I love my alma mater, that's a whole different approach to me. And that is an alum. I was most likely to say, well, cool. Let's have a conversation about what it is you're doing at life after your institution. I see you just wrote all of your heart in that $50.
Yeah.
So maybe we can do something like take a picture with you on social media and da 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 and da da da. And so that I think in our community, going back to your point about intention, I think the way we approach each other with intention matters a lot, whether it's a business transaction or it's philanthropy or if it's leadership. I think this point of intention you made is extremely important, about how we reach each other and how we intend to either pull each other up or how we unintentionally push each other down. So I don't know if all that even made sense, but
No,
yeah.
it made absolute sense, Eddie. So what came to mind for me, and you kind of you touched on it, is that for the person who is seeking to give whatever that is, time, talent, treasure,
Hmm.
testimony, truth, tithes, right? All the T's. That you've done your due diligence to listen and hear from the recipient, to be
Hmm.
very clear about what it is that they truly want or need, and don't
Hmm.
show up with your assumptions, your bias, or just like you said, this kind of, well, I know you need this. Well, no, and let's like
And
let's be
don't show up
clear.
with your ego either. Don't show up with your ego. We don't
Yeah,
need your
yeah,
ego.
yeah, that part, right? So do your due diligence and hearing and listening from the recipient to ensure that you're in alignment with one another, because also what you don't want is for you to be assuming that they need this particular thing dollar for one particular purpose, and then they use it for something else, and now you in your feelings because
Yeah.
you like, well, I thought it was going towards this. Well, you didn't even clarify, have that
I,
level of discussion. But also I
I've
want to put
heard
that
that.
on
I
the
have heard
flip
that
side.
so many times. I heard that
Yeah,
so many times.
yeah,
Yep. Hmm.
yeah. Put it on the flip side, because also you need to be mindful that like sometimes folks be trying to restrict dollars that really shouldn't be restricted. Like it's not that. Like just go ahead and give that and allow them to use it for their greatest need or whatever their intentional need is in that moment. But also I want to put
Hmm.
some responsibility, it's a double-ended responsibility from that also back on the
Yeah.
recipient, that
Yeah.
they are, you have a responsibility to be clearly communicating what your need is and being honest about that. And when you're in conversations with a potential donor, funder, community stakeholder, community member, someone who's potentially going to be an investor, and whatever that looks like, that you're honest about what it is that you truly want and need. So when you make that ask, there's connection, and being okay with when there isn't, and
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
okay with saying no to, like, a source, a resource, and or the actual resource itself, or the resource from with whom it is coming from, because it is not in an alignment with your mission, your vision, and or your objectives. Because also there's this interesting thing where folks are taking money, and then on the back end they come to consultants like me and trying to figure out how they gonna make this thing work or make it fit, and you're like, well, wait a minute, you don't even do that type of work, or the thing that you took it for, that doesn't even exist right now. So now you're trying to make it a thing. And this is creating unnecessary harm for likely the staff, or let me say this, the
Mm-hmm.
frontline folks who got to actually execute on the thing. Because oftentimes
Yep.
the leaders just take the money and then, that's their job to go make the ass and get the money. But it's other folks in other departments and other areas of the organization or company who actually have to deliver on it and
Mm-hmm.
execute. And now you got them running around trying to create a whole new thing, and you're taking them away from what was already bought into, invested in, and likely that everyone had agreed upon was really and truly a priority. And now you've
Mm-hmm.
shifted the focus to something else because of some donor expectations or their interests. And so again, I just wanted to name the ways that that's twofold, that it's the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
responsibility of you as the philanthropist, as the community person who wants to partner with said entity for greater good and with right intentions, that you've made sure that there's an alignment, and for that person who's on the recipient side, that they've done that same level of due diligence and see this as a partnership and not just like a, hey, well, let me just get it from you and we'll figure it out on the other side because we just need the money. Like, no, let's go about this the right way, because again, philanthropy is about love and action, and is that rooted in love or greed?
Mm-hmm.
But
Last question I got to ask you.
yes.
How have you personally grown from the leadership that you have done, the work you've done with Heritage, everything? How have you personally grown?
Man, how have I personally grown? I mean, in so many ways. I mean, let me say this. I mean, I've been able to build a very successful career
Hmm.
off of this, or not off of this per se, you know what I mean? But also, but by way of my intentional work and service in this
Hmm.
industry. I mean, previously I was in sales and marketing and advertising sales, right? And I could have very well been, just as successful, and probably made a lot more money had I stayed down that lane. However, man, being able to align who I truly am, and that is I'm an empath. I'm a
Hmm.
cancer child. I just love, and I mean, and it gets in the way sometimes of my leadership. I've written about it. Look it up. There's an article about empathetic leadership or leading,
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
empathetic leadership, that it can be a crutch at the same time. But
Yeah.
it has helped me to be um, who I authentically am and who I believe that God had, birthed me to be. It allows me to bring all the attributes of, who I am that I've inherited by way of my family, their influence, the DNA, bloodline, and also the gifts that's, gift the gab, talker, not afraid of anybody, let's get, sales, attitude, business attitude, and mesh it all together for greater good. And so, yeah, so I've been able to build a career, be able to take care of my two sons, as a, an unmarried woman, through all these years, and be an example for them, which has been most important, for me, and ultimately creating a legacy that they and my future, grandchildren, greats, and all them will be able to build upon as well. So,
Well, Akilah, I appreciate you. You my girl. You my girl. So it's
absolutely.
really cool having you. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Akilah
Yes.
Wallace, she is the founder of Heritage Giving Fund. Also, she is a principal consultant of Taylor Wallace Social Impact Consulting. Akilah, thank you so much for joining me on For Our Edification.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eddie. Appreciate you. Tell Halima I said hey.
So many thanks to Akilah Wallace for joining me on For Our Edification. You can check out past episodes by going to eddiefrancis.com. You can also go to YouTube, and of course, you can get For Our Edification wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, I'm only asking you to do 3 things for me: download, give feedback, and share. I'm Eddie Francis for Dr. Halima Lee Francis. Thank you for joining me on this episode of For Our Edification.